In 1776, the 13 colonies of America were struggling to win their independence from Great Britain. The colonial leaders found themselves faced with three important issues: the urgency of wartime, the need for foreign aid and recognition, and a growth of national feelings. To handle these demands, a central governing body was clearly needed. By 1777, they began to develop the framework of an independent government with the drafting of the Articles of Confederation. By March 1, 1781, all of the states had ratified the Articles of Confederation. It allowed for only one legislative body composed of representatives chosen annually by the state legislatures. Each state was only allowed one vote in Congress, regardless of population. The new Congress was given no power to tax or control commerce. There was no independent judicial branch or an executive branch to enforce federal laws. When the war with Britain officially ended in 1783, the weakness and ineffectiveness of the Articles forced many leaders to rethink the design of the government. In 1786, two outstanding men, James Madison of Virginia and Alexander Hamilton of New York, made a bold call to Congress to convene a meeting of delegates from all states. On the second Monday in May 1787, 55 delegates gathered for a constitutional convention in Philadelphia. Generally, the convention was united in the belief that a stronger national government was important to the success of the United States. Those who did not believe that changes were necessary remained at home. Various plans and committees helped bring order to the convention. Among the significant results was the Virginia Plan, drafted primarily by Madison and presented by Edmund Randolph of the Virginia delegation. The Virginia Plan boldly proposed a new national government with representation in the legislature based solely on each state's population. Smaller states voiced concern and supported the New Jersey Plan proposed by William Patterson of the New Jersey delegation. The New Jersey Plan retained the Articles of Confederation, which gave the states equal power in the legislature and added a Supreme Court. In mid-July, Roger Sherman, a delegate from Connecticut, offered a compromise. His plan called for a two-chambered legislature. Finally, on September 17, 1787, after a summer of heated debates, the United States Constitution emerged and provided for a central government with three branches: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. Article 1 of the Constitution states, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives." The bicameral or two-chambered legislature was created to balance power between the large and small states. It was agreed that states would be represented equally in the Senate and in proportion to their population in the House. The U.S. Constitution states in Article 1, Section 3 that the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. The Constitution also requires that the terms of 1/3 of the members expire every 2 years. The resulting overlapping of terms provides a continuing body of legislators. Furthermore, the Constitution states that senators must be at least 30 years old, be a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and be a resident of the state in which he or she is elected. The Constitution originally provided that senators be selected by their state legislatures. But in 1913, the 17th Amendment was passed and required senators be elected by a popular vote of the people of their state. The Constitution further states, "The Vice President of the United States shall be President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided." In the absence of the Vice President, the President pro tem, chosen by the Senate, presides. For the most part, both the Senate and the House have equal powers. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Congress has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce, to coin money, to establish post offices, to declare war, to raise and support an army and a navy. and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. A few exceptions exist, one being the power of confirmation. The Constitution requires that the President of the United States appoint government officials with the advice and consent of the Senate. All the President's nominations are accepted or rejected by a vote of the Senate. The Constitution also requires that the Senate give its advice and consent to a treaty. A 2/3 vote of the senators present is necessary for treaty ratification. To handle the challenges of the nation, Congress established a committee system. In the early years, the Senate formed a committee for almost every issue it confronted. Soon, hundreds of small committees bogged down all progress. To remedy this situation, in 1816, the Senate established legislative committees. Since then, the committees have become essential to the effective operation of both the Senate and the House. The system is a powerful means for managing bills. There are 3 types of Senate committees: standing committees, select committees, and joint committees. Standing committees are fixed and permanent. Among the 16 standing committees are Agriculture, Appropriations, Armed Services, Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs, Foreign Relations, and Judiciary. Select committees are created for specified purposes and are not permanent. One of the most famous was formed during President Richard Nixon's administration. It was called the Select Committee to investigate presidential campaign activities, more commonly referred to as the Watergate Committee. Select or special committees expire after they submit their final report to the Senate. Joint committees became an expedient means for the Senate and House of Representatives to handle specific issues. They were more common in the early years of Congress. Recent joint committees are the Joint Economic Committee, the Joint Library of Congress Committee, the Joint Committee on Taxation, and the Joint Committee on Printing. As their names indicate, they perform housekeeping functions or conduct studies. Committee chairmanships have often been coveted and long-lasting roles. This changed in 1995 when the Senate adopted a rule that limits the committee chairman to a 6-year term. Legislation can be introduced only by a member of the Senate or representatives in the House, and only when Congress is in session. Once a bill is introduced, it is assigned a number and printed. The bill then works its way through the legislative process. All bills must be approved, disapproved, or amended by both houses of Congress, and no measure becomes law until it has been passed by a majority of both the House and the Senate. The actual process through which a bill becomes law can generally begin in either house with committee hearings. A bill on defense, for example, might first be considered by the Senate Armed Services Committee and then after, or simultaneously, by the House Committee of the same name. These hearings may take months in each house, with scores of witnesses testifying and dozens of amendments offered. If the bill is reported out of committee, debate then takes place on the House and Senate floors, and new amendments may be offered before a vote is taken. Even if a measure passes both houses, the 2 versions may differ substantially. A conference committee from both bodies then tries to write a compromise. Then the compromise bill has to be passed again by a majority of both houses. Should this pass, the President can sign the bill and enact it into law, or he can veto the bill. But his veto can be overridden by a 2/3 vote of both houses. If the law is challenged, the Supreme Court can decide on its constitutionality. Impeachment is a shared power by the House and the Senate. The process of impeaching high-level officials starts with the House, who conducts the investigation and brings charges. The House then argues the removal of the individual from office during a trial conducted in the Senate. Between 1789 and 1999, the Senate sat as a court of impeachment 16 times. 7 cases ended in conviction and 7 in acquittal. 2 cases were dismissed by the Senate. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides only over the impeachment trial of a president. Twice in history, the President of the United States faced impeachment. The most recent was Bill Clinton. He was subsequently acquitted after a 5-week-long trial in 1999. The first was Andrew Johnson in 1868. Post-Civil War issues brought President Johnson within one vote of being removed from office. Johnson left his office in 1869 embittered and in disgrace, but later found a degree of exoneration when he regained his Senate seat only 5 months before his death in 1875. The course of the U.S. Senate's history has been shaped by the times. For the first 30 years, the Senate performed its functions in the shadow of the larger and more boisterous House of Representatives. When the first Senate convened on March 4, 1789, in Federal Hall, New York City, only 8 of the 22 eligible members attended. Another month passed before the 12 members necessary to provide a quorum answered the roll call. When the Senate finally went into action, it elected New Hampshire's John Langdon president pro tem and invited the House of Representatives to its chambers to count the electoral ballots for the first president and vice president of the United States. On April 21st, John Adams took his oath as vice president and assumed his duties. 9 days later, the Senate and House crowded together to watch George Washington's inauguration. The first session of the Senate proceeded with caution. The senators were aware that every move or decision was precedent-setting. Among the responsibilities was that of agreeing to presidential nominations and treaties. In August 1789, President Washington visited the Senate to consult about a recently negotiated Indian treaty. Washington expected an immediate response, but to his great frustration, the Senate referred the question to committee for further study. Once Washington received Senate approval, he vowed that he would never again visit the Senate in person. A second session began in January 1790. During the next 7 months, the Senate focused its efforts on the nation's financial well-being. The Senate also moved its temporary headquarters to Philadelphia, while the permanent home of the nation's government was under construction on the Potomac River. The Senate met in Philadelphia for 10 years until Washington, D.C. was completed. During its first years, the Senate conducted its business behind closed doors. But the closed-door policy became unpopular. In 1794, a clash between Federalists and Anti-Federalists over the seating of newly elected Pennsylvania Senator Albert Gallatin brought a partial abandonment to the policy. The Federalist majority feared that their planned rejection of Gallatin on questionable constitutional grounds, if done in secret, would trigger public outrage. The press was already covering open sessions of the House of Representatives, which helped popularize that body's role. While the doors swung open for the election of Gallatin, they generally remained closed for executive business related to presidential nominations and treaties until 1929. On November 21, 1800, the Senate moved to Washington, D.C., first to temporary basement quarters in the unfinished Capitol, and a decade later to a grander chamber on the second floor. In 1833, the Senate membership had risen to only 48, compared with the 242 in the House of Representatives. With its smaller membership and equal balance between slave and free states, the Senate offered an excellent stage for lively discussions and debate. In 1834, Alexis de Tocqueville, French scholar and observer of American life, wrote of the young governing group, "The Senate is composed of eloquent advocates, distinguished generals, wise magistrates, and statesmen of note, whose arguments would do honor to the most remarkable parliamentary debates in Europe." At the same time, America was a nation faced with growing tensions regarding states' rights and the extension of slavery into the territories. Men like Daniel Webster of Massachusetts, Henry Clay of Kentucky, and John C. Calhoun of South Carolina vigorously and eloquently debated the issues during the Senate's golden era. The Senate's importance continued to grow. As Senator Daniel Webster said, "This is a Senate of equals, of men of individual honor and personal character, and of absolute independence. We know no masters, we acknowledge no dictators." Their efforts delayed the eventual outbreak of the Civil War, while the national government gained experience and the ability to better survive under the Constitution when it did face the Civil War. When the Civil War ended, the Senate dealt firmly with the reconstruction of the United States and believed that only Congress should preside over the readmission of Southern states and their representatives. As the country grew, change in the legislative duties and dynamics of the Senate could be seen. In 1876, Republican Senator John J. Ingalls of Kansas observed, "Rules are never observed in this body. They are only made to be broken. We are a law unto ourselves." During the series of weak presidents that followed President Andrew Johnson throughout the 19th century, Congress developed into the strongest branch of the government. Senators believed the primary function of the executive office was to enforce the laws enacted by Congress. By the beginning of the 20th century, the energetic presidencies of Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson challenged senatorial dominance, and the balance of power shifted toward the presidency. But whenever it could, the Senate would deliver its powerful message to the president. For example, at the end of World War I, President Wilson received a major blow at the end of his term when the Senate rejected the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war and created the League of Nations. At the depths of the Great Depression of the 1930s, a degree of bipartisanship prevailed. The Senate enthusiastically supported President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program of recovery, relief, and reform. However, his relationship with the Senate would be strained over Supreme Court nominations. By the 1850s, the westward expansion of the United States had added numerous new states to the Union. This also meant more senators and representatives would be sent to Washington. To accommodate the increased membership, the Senate moved to a larger chamber. This room is where the Senate continues to meet to present day. At the front of the room is the podium. For ceremonial occasions, the President of the Senate or the President pro tem sits at the rostrum. For day-to-day business, a person appointed by the President pro tem to chair the Senate occupies the seat. Others seated on the podium include the Minority Secretary, Majority Secretary, Sergeant-at-Arms, assorted pages and clerks, a parliamentarian, and a timekeeper. On the floor of the chamber are the senators' desks. A new senator is assigned a desk in the rear of the Senate chamber and moves toward the front as he or she gains seniority. Special desks are designated for the senatorial leadership of both the Democratic and Republican parties. The center aisle divides the Democratic and Republican parties. As you face the rostrum, Democrats sit to the left and Republicans to the right. Only the filibuster can interrupt the typical style of business on the Senate floor. A filibuster is unlimited debate. It is used in the Senate to put off or block an action on a bill. Teamwork is often required as a group of senators holds the floor for days and even weeks. The filibuster became such a problem that in 1917, Rule 22 was adopted that allowed the Senate to end a debate with a two-thirds majority vote, a tactic called cloture, which greatly limits the filibuster. Political parties had not been considered by the Founding Fathers, nor were they provided for in the Constitution. However, in time it became apparent that political parties were important to the function of government. Eventually, in the 1920s, both the Democrats and the Republicans began to formally designate their Senate floor leaders. Now these leaders serve as a spokesperson for their party's positions on issues. Depending on the party in power, one is referred to as the majority leader and the other as the minority leader. Although party floor leadership carries great responsibility, it has few specific powers. The party leaders meet frequently with the President and with the leaders of the House of Representatives. No senator of modern times has rivaled the effectiveness of Lyndon B. Johnson, Democrat from Texas. Johnson served as minority leader from 1953 to 1954 and as majority leader from 1955 until 1961, when he resigned to accept the nomination to be John F. Kennedy's running mate. The story goes that the Senate was working hard and late into the night when Johnson was majority leader. One weary senator complained to a colleague, "What's all the hurry? Rome wasn't built in a day." "No, but Lyndon Johnson wasn't foreman on that job," said the other. Both parties also elect whips, a term based on the fox hunting expression, whipper in, referring to the member of the hunting team responsible for keeping the dogs from straying from the team during a chase. These assistant leaders are mainly responsible for counting heads and rounding up party members for votes and quorum calls. Together, the 100 senators wield great power. Each generation has produced senators who capture attention and strive to leave their mark on the future of the country. On May 1, 1957, a committee headed by then-Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts named the 5 most outstanding senators in history. Criteria for the honor included acts of statesmanship transcending party and state lines, and leadership in national thought and constitutional interpretation as well as legislation. It was not an easy process. In the end, the Kennedy Committee felt that they had found 5 senators who had served their country long and could represent the early history of the Senate. Few were surprised by the so-called Great Triumvirate: Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and John C. Calhoun. Though never quite on the same side of the issues, these great statesmen fashioned legislative compromises that held the nation together during the tumultuous years leading to the Civil War. Daniel Webster of Massachusetts articulated the Northern interests when he said, "One country, one Constitution, one destiny." John C. Calhoun of South Carolina spoke for the South. "A power has risen up in the government greater than the people themselves." Henry Clay of Kentucky, known as the Great Compromiser and visionary of the westward expansion, said, "Government is a trust, and the officers of the government are trustees, and both the trust and the trustees are created for the benefit of the people." The 4th honoree was Robert M. La Follette of Wisconsin, who served from 1906 to 1925. He was known as Fighting Bob, and he spearheaded legislation for conservation, antitrust reform, and banking reform. The final honoree was Robert Taft from Ohio, who served from 1939 to 1953. Taft, known as Mr. Republican, was respected for his tenacious and uncompromising principles. The portraits of these 5 great senators hang in the Capitol's Senate reception room. Nearly 50 years has passed since the Kennedy Committee named the famous 5 as the senators who exemplified the highest standards of the Senate. Since that time, many more great leaders have crossed the Senate threshold. Some have become president. Others have served long and patriotically as senators from their state. Since its inception, the membership of the U.S. Senate has always been impressive. As of January 2001, 1,864 individuals have recited the oath of office as provided for in Article 6 of the Constitution. The form of the oath was established by law. "I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God." Minority representation in the Senate has evolved slowly. The first African American was Hiram R. Revels from Mississippi, who entered the Senate in 1870. Other firsts include Charles Curtis of Kansas, the first Native American to enter the Senate in 1907. In 1928, Octaviano Larrazolo from New Mexico became the first Hispanic American. And in 1959, Hiram Leon Fong from New Hampshire was elected the first senator of Chinese ancestry. In its entire history, only 31 senators have been women, less than 2%. The first was Rebecca Latimer Felton, appointed in 1922. The first elected woman was Hattie Wyatt Caraway of Arkansas, who was appointed to fill the vacancy caused by the death of her husband, U.S. Senator Thaddeus Caraway. Mrs. Caraway then sought and won the election on her own in 1932. She was re-elected in 1938 and served until 1945. In 1992, Carol Moseley Braun of Illinois became the first African American woman in the Senate. As of January 2001, 13 women are U.S. senators. This group includes Hillary Rodham Clinton, the first wife of a president to become a senator. She represents the state of New York. Some senators have managed long tenures of service. Senator Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri was the first to serve 30 years. On May 25, 1997, Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina became the longest-serving member of the Senate. His career in the Senate began in 1954. Thurmond also has the distinction of holding the individual record for longest filibuster, 24 hours and 18 minutes, in an attempt to block civil rights legislation in 1957. For the first time since 1881, the 2001 Senate is equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. The Senate has convened for over 200 years. Since its inception, the framers of the U.S. Constitution had a concept of government that has endured civil war and discontent, and has been a timeless guide throughout the history of a great nation. The prestige of being a senator has the cost of long and hard work days. In 1987, Majority Leader Robert Byrd from West Virginia said, "We could make it a 9-to-5 job, but it would no longer be the United States Senate." The lasting benefit of the Senate is its faithfulness to the principles of the Constitution and its responsiveness to the complex demands of a diverse society.